news and results as part of Wrestling Rants, baby! Yay! Let's get into a brand new day and a brand new concept of the RANTROSPECTIVE brand. That is starting right here, right now, at Wrestling Rants with RANTROSPECTIVE, this day in wrestling. On a Throwback Thursday, RANTROSPECTIve will be coming down the pipeline each and every Thursday with this special feature where we're going to be looking back at this exact day in wrestling, June 8th. We're going to take a look back at what all happened in wrestling on this day. So next Thursday, for example, which will be June 15th, we will take a look back at the world of wrestling back on June 15th and everything that happened with it. So we cover all of wrestling history in this retrospective from top to bottom, everything that is notable that happened on this day in wrestling. So let's waste no more time. Let's just get into it right away. I usually start in chronological order with some of the older news, and then we just move our way up until the more recent stuff. So, we are going to start this edition of RANTROSPECTIVE this day in wrestling on June 8th with 1998. The year is 1998, with a couple things that actually happened on this day in 1998 of note. First and foremost, a big event happened in the world of wrestling on 1998, June 8th, and that was the second Clash of the Champions WCW events. Of course, we know the first Clash of the Champions was an absolute classic. Ran head-to-head with, I believe, WrestleMania 4 in late March of 1998, the same year. And that was headlined by Sting against Ric Flair in an all-time classic match that went to a time limit 60-minute draw. 1998, June 8th, Clash of the Champions 2 Miami Mayhem occurred. This was the follow-up to that inaugural event. From the James L. Knight Center in Miami, Florida, the main event was a double disqualification match between the Four Horsemen of Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard against Sting and the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. I ended up watching this today on the WWE Network, and this match was really fun. Take the shitty finish out of the mix, but it did kind of play into things with the way the Four Horsemen were at the time, trying to get their way out of a situation, and that's basically what happened here. Arn and Tully retained the tag championships against Sting and Dusty Rhodes via a double disqualification, I may add. In those contexts of things, that means the champions retain. We'll get into the entire match lineup. There really wasn't anything else of huge substance on that event, but go check it out on the WWE Network if you want to take a look at past history. Clash of the Champions 2 Miami Mayhem. Also on the same day in 1998, a major title change happened. Not so much that it was, I guess, a newsworthy championship title change in the WWF per se, but a WWF championship changed hands, get this, at an All Japan women's event of all places. On top of it, neither team in this match were actually even contracted by the WWF at this point. At this point, they had let both teams essentially go on a contracted basis, as they had given up the idea of a women's tag team division. So, in Satayama, Japan, on June 8, 1988, at an All-Japan women's event, the team of the Glamour Girls defeated the Jumping Bomb Angels to regain those WWF Women's Tag Team Championships. These were the first iteration of the Women's Tag Team Championships in WWE. And this, naturally, the original title switch from the Jumping Bomb Angels defeating the Glamour Girls occurred at the first ever Royal Rumble in January 1998. So this was essentially a rematch of that match, and the Glamour Girls defeated the Jumping Mom Angels this time via countout. And another interesting twist on this one, and because they were in an All Japan Women's Wrestling ring, the rules of All Japan Women was that a title can change hands on a countout. A lot of Japanese promotions have this kind of set where by disqualification or countout you can actually still get the championship. So really an interesting turn of events for this one. Like I said, neither teams were contracted by the WWF at this time, but yet they switched the titles on this show in another promotion, in another country even. And ultimately, the titles become kind of worthless as 1998 continues on. I think the Glamour Girls may have been signed for a few shots by WWF to defend the championships, but not much at all. I'm not sure if I do not think the Glamour Girls were at, like for instance, Survivor Series 1998. I know in 87 or 88, one of those years, they had a multi-women elimination match, but I'm pretty sure that was in 1987. So really, the Glamour Girls really kind of fell off the face of the earth for the rest of the year in WWF. And then officially, the titles were claimed defunct or dead in the next year, 1989, on actually Valentine's Day of all days. They officially kind of killed off the belts. So, little history for you all there. Let's talk about 1990. 1990 saw an interesting big shift of things in All Japan Wrestling. This was for the men. The legend Misaharu Misawa got his first big star-making win in Japan, in All Japan, to set up the kind of the what they called the Four Pillars era, of All Japan, which is a legendary era where the work rate was just tremendous, where we had Kenta Kobashi, we had Toshiaki Kawada, and other stars of All Japan really leading the brigade. Misawa won over Jumbo Tsuruta in this match as a kind of a passing of the torch, and this really skyrocketed Misawa in All Japan. And at this point, from this point on, things got really different in All Japan in a really heightened golden era of this company all the way through the 90s for the most part, maybe up till about 96, 97. Really things were hitting, like I said, with Misawa, Kawada, Kobashi, Kiritawe. There were just tons of talent back in the day. So this was a really star-making performance and a changing of the guard in All Japan Wrestling. 1997 we move to now. June 8th, 1997. The King of the Ring tournament by the WWF occurred in Providence, Rhode Island. This pay-per-view was the one that Triple H got the nod for the King of the Ring after a few years of basically paying for the Click incident in Madison Square Garden, or at least a year of paying for that incident. Triple H finally gets the nod over Mankind in the finals. Little bit of a history thing here, or a little bit of a trivia note. Triple H was actually originally supposed to go over at King of the Ring 96. Some of you may or may have not known that. That was the one, of course, that the star was born in Stone Cold Steve Austin as well. Also on this show, the Hart Foundation is a 6-man over Sid Vicious, Psycho Sid, and the Legion of Doom. If you recall, this sets up the following month where they do Canadian Stampede in Your House, which was in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and one of the more livelier crowds in WWF history for sure. Also in this one, a double DQ between Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin, who were the tag champs at the time, if I recall. And then Undertaker defeated Farouk in the main event to retain the WWF Championship. Let's move on to 1999. There was a few things in WCW and WWF on this day. This was a Tuesday. And if you recall back in the day, we used to have a live Raw every other week. So on the 7th of June, there was a live Raw. Then on June 8th, they actually taped the next week's Raw. This one particularly was of note because this was episode number 316 of Monday Night Raw. This was the Raw, if you recall, that Stone Cold Steve Austin was kind of CEO, playing that CEO role. Very, very famous episode of Raw. So that was taped on this day in 1999. Also, Ivory defeated Deborah for the women's title on that show. And then that aired actually the following Monday on regular Monday Night Raw time slot. Also, on the same day in 1999 as well, there was a WCW Thunder taping that Perry Saturn and Chris Benoit defeated Diamond Dallas Page and Canyon for the WCW Tag Championships. I do not remember that match whatsoever. I might have to go and check that one out. Then we move a little bit ahead to 2004. This was not so much a match that happened or an event, but a controversial situation that happened on this day on June 8th, 2004, and that was that John Bradshaw Layfield was fired from a show that he did on CNBC. I believe it was called Squawk Box or something like that. He was fired because of a tour they did in Germany where to get heel heat, Bradshaw actually did the goose step in the ring and the Nazi Hail kind of Hitler kind of thing going on there too. Got some heat a little bit in the arena in Germany, but this caused a wave of controversy. I don't know if he was actually told to do this. I don't think he was. I think he did this on his own volition. And there actually is a law in Germany that you are not supposed to do that in public. The goose step and the Hail Hitler, the Nazi sign of power. So he got in a lot of heat over this, and he lost an opportunity in CNBC once they found out about what had happened. Just literally, I think it was a week or two before the firing happened. I think Bradshaw still stayed on Fox News. I know he had a segment there as well. I'm not positive, but for sure, he got fired from CNBC for those antics. And he's lucky he didn't get in trouble with German law enforcement because that technically was an illegal activity that he did in front of a crowd. So we move on to 2008 now, where TNA presented Slammiversary. This was in South Haven, Mississippi, near Memphis, Tennessee. Here were some matches that happened on the show. Samoa Joe retained the TNA Championship in a King of the Mountain match with Kevin Nash as special enforcer over Booker T, Christian Cage, Rhino, and Bobby Roode. That was the main event. We also had AJ Styles over Kurt Angle in the undercard. LAX over Team 3D to retain the TNA Tag Titles. Petey Williams defeated Kazarian to retain the X Division Championship. And Awesome Kong went over Serena Deeb in some sort of $25,000 challenge. This show unfortunately became infamous in history because a TNA road worker after the show actually died when a scaffolding collapsed in the arena as they were tearing down the show. His name was Kevin Sinex, and he took about a 25 foot fall off a scaffolding as it collapsed, and unfortunately it killed him and injured some other workers. So very, very an infamous event after the show aired. This happened as they were tearing the show down. Really sad situation. Let's fast forward to 2014. 2014 saw the finale of the Best of Super Juniors 21 tournament from New Japan. And Ricochet ended up being, at the time, the youngest Best of Super Juniors winner at age 25 as he went over Kushida in the finals on this day in 2014. So, interesting little news item there. I believe the next year or the year after, when Will Ospreay won the Best of Super Juniors tournament, he became the youngest winner ever at age 23. 2016, we had NXT TakeOver pay-per-view entitled The End of the Beginning, where there was a lot of workers on this show, where sooner than later they moved to the main roster, hence the title of the TakeOver. Main event was Samoa Joe and Finn Balor in a cage, which Joe did win. Asuka went over Nia Jax. Shinsuke Nakamura over Austin Aries. I do not remember that match at all. FTR, known as the Revival back in the day here, went over American Alpha. That's Gable and Jason Jordan. Andrade went over Ty Dillinger, now known as Shawn Spears. And in the pre-show, we had Ember Moon, also known as Athena, over Peyton Royce as well, who formerly of the Iconics, now not in wrestling at all anymore, actually. She is now married and carrying baby, or did they have a child with Shawn Spears, ironically enough. So there you go. Interesting lineup for that TakeOver event. And then some of the most recent on this day, back in 2020, this was during the pandemic era. This was actually around the period where I believe WWE was maybe in the Thunderdome at this point, but they were definitely in Orlando. There was no crowd. And AJ Styles went over Daniel Bryan in the finals of the Intercontinental Championship tournament on SmackDown. Sami Zayn was previously the champion, and he had to vacate the title when he decided he was staying home because of the pandemic, and thus had to pony up his Intercontinental Championship. So, championship tournament concluded on this day in 2020. AJ Styles over Daniel Bryan in the finals on SmackDown. And that is on this day, June 8th, as part of RANTROSPECTIVE. Hope you enjoyed it. There was a lot of stuff that happened on this day, June 8th. Let's check out next Thursday, and let's see what all happened June 15th as part of our next RANTROSPECTIve. And stay tuned. Tomorrow we're going to have versus Impact versus Ring of Honor head-to-head on the Thursday Night War. Let's talk about it tomorrow as part of Versus. See y'all right back here tomorrow for Versus right here. Wrestling. Rants.